We have a guest lecturer today, Chris Joseph, as his name shows on the board. He's going to talk about important things. I'll let him do the introduction. Oil pipelines, I believe, something like that.
Somewhat.
Okay, good. He's a SFU grad. He can talk for himself.
All right. As far as I know, Dave wants me to take about an hour, and I've got some slides. Think about an hour, but also, or half an hour, but also some questions for you guys. So I did my master's here in the REM department, Resource Environmental Management. Worked for a few years, and then did a PhD, and just finished that up last year. My undergrad was actually at University of Victoria in geography, and I don't know if anyone's taken any geography classes, but geography can be everything. And so what I focused on was resource management, and then the environmental management stuff, and that's what the master's and PhD had to do with. But for the PhD, I definitely got into a lot of economics, and I guess that's how I got here. Am I in the right spot, Dave? So I understand you guys have been talking about pipelines and maybe oil sands or LNG or just oil pipelines.
Just the pipeline. They did a briefing on costs and benefits for BC.
And this is the Enbridge Northern Gateway pipeline?
Any pipeline, generally.
Right. Right, I had a look. You sent some materials. Right, so I guess, I should just back up. Yeah, I work for a small firm, Compass Resource Management. It's actually, about half of us are from the REM department at SFU. And then pretty much the other half is from a similar school at UBC. And it's just people that have interdisciplinary education and background in decision sciences, economics, planning, policy, engineering, a variety of things. But, I don't know what fields you guys are planning on going into, but if you're going into thinking about dealing with environmental problems, you want a broad cross-section of skills, and economics, I think, is a key one of those. So yeah, I guess you're familiar with this. This is the proposed pipeline route for Enbridge Northern Gateway. These are, I know you can't read that, I can't even read it on my screen, but these are different shipping routes. The pipeline comes into Kitimat in the yellow, comes out Douglas Channel to about Hartley Bay or Wright Sound, and then there's either a southern route or a northern route up around Haida Gwaii. I had a chance to, this isn't me, this is a colleague. I guess we got to turn those lights off, eh? No? Okay. This is my colleague, Robin Gregory. He's actually a prof at UBC, but he's actually from Oregon, I think, but he lives, he's got a place in Galiano Island. Anyway, Robin's a decision scientist, I guess. He and I were up testifying to the Joint Review Panel last year around this time. And, it was pretty ironic. This is a picture in front of the Chance's Prince Rupert Casino. And it's kind of ironic that we were in the basement of the Chance's Casino debating oil spill risks. But anyway, that was a fun experience because we had lawyers trying to find holes in our arguments, and I've never been in that situation. So that was fun. Right. So yeah, and so what I thought I'd talk a bit about today is, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the environmental assessment process. For pipelines like Northern Gateway, it's a combined Canadian Environmental Assessment Act process and a National Energy Board Act process, and those get merged or harmonized. Joint Review Panel, for these big controversial projects, they create something called a review panel. In this case, it's called joint because of that harmonization of the federal EA process and the National Energy Board process. But it's basically three people that, I don't know, for about 2 years, they, not constantly, but over the span of 2 years, traveled around BC and Alberta, gathering evidence from experts, from public, everyday people, from landowners, etc. And so we were up there as one of the final evidence gathering sessions to answer questions on the evidence that we submitted. So Robin and I and some others were working for the Gitgat Nation, which I don't know if you don't have a pointer or something, eh? Do you guys know where Hartley Bay is? You ever heard of Hartley Bay? Anyone heard of Hartley Bay? Any idea what Hartley Bay might be? Hartley Bay is, you see there's there's two sections of orange and black dotted lines, and there's a bottom section. There's a dot there with two words. Anyway, Hartley Bay is one of the most remote communities in BC. It's the only reserve of the Gitgat Nation where people live. Most Gitgat people live in Prince Rupert, which is up more on the northern end of this slide. Hartley Bay, it's about a 4-hour boat ride there or a 45-minute float plane ride. It's a really neat community. I should have brought some pictures because they don't have any roads. They have wood boardwalks that can fit quad runners. And they've got their ambulance is sort of an enlarged quad. But anyway, they boot around and walk around on these wood boardwalks. Anyway, that's what we were working for, the Gitgat. And we were hired to look at the potential economic impacts of Enbridge Northern Gateway on Gitgat interests. So things like commercial fishing, tourism, they sell carbon offsets to earn revenue, these types of things. What I'm working on right now, boy, this is kind of blurry. You can see a bunch of colored lines. Prince Rupert is on the left there, Hartley Bay's down here, so here's the BC coast. Haida Gwa's out there. Here's Kitimat. I think this might be the Enbridge Northern Gateway line. But the rest of these lines are proposed, actually one of them is existing, but the rest are proposed natural gas pipelines. So are you guys familiar with the ambition of the provincial government right now to export a whole lot of gas to Asia? Vaguely familiar? The BC government. You're keeping me on the specifics. So that's what a lot of my work is right now. And what this shows is the blue icons are different terminals, all proposed. Those are all proposed natural gas terminals. And these yellow lines are the different shipping routes. They all head out north of Haida Gwa or down south. But this is because some of the analysis we're doing right now is looking at how much shipping traffic, large vessel traffic, both container ports and coals, but also oil and gas, how much of that is overlapping yet? You had a question? Correct, LNG. There's about 20 proposals as far as I understand. Yeah. You have a question? Yeah, you bet. I don't know. Dave might get upset though. I'm learning how to use Google Earth, and it's a lot of fun when I don't accidentally delete things and whatever. Yeah, so there's some proposed for down south. I mean, I haven't seen a list of 20, but I'm told there's 20 proposals.
I thought that there was only 3.
No, you're wrong.
And that some of them are going to turn to be expanded.
Probably once a lot of these projects get in, a lot of companies try and expand, but anyway, more than 3. So what I thought I'd talk to you about is where assessing impacts fits into environmental assessment. Does anyone know, can anyone tell me what the environmental assessment process is essentially, what it's trying to do? Anyone want to take a guess? Okay, you can take a guess. And is it necessarily damages? Yeah, you're starting to raise your hand. Yeah, so that's important. It does look at benefits as well as the damages, the negatives. Does it just cover environmental impacts? No, I know the name is environmental assessment. It was originally set up, the U.S. National Environmental Protection Act, NEPA, 1970. That's where environmental assessment was born, and it's pretty much done to some extent around the world. But what other types of things might it look at then if it's not, or what could you conceive of fitting in within the label environment? Any ideas? I'm going to just put people on the spot. What else might fit in? What benefits and costs or pros and cons or positive and negatives might fit in? If you were a decision maker, what would you want information on? If you were the premier of BC and you had to weigh in on this Northern Gateway project, what would you want information on? Costs? Sure, so I'm just going to generalize it to financial costs or economic costs. Yeah.
Social values,
Operational, sorry,
Aboriginal people.
original people. And so, sure, how their rights and title might be affected. Yeah. Were you going to add something too or no? Oh, I thought you. Anybody, any other ideas? Okay, well, basically, I mean, environmental assessment is a government process to inform decision making. Oh, why did I write that again, environmental assessment? I guess I should say environmental impact assessment. So you see the acronyms EIA and EA, project appraisal, project evaluation. You know, World Bank, when they decide to loan $1 billion or whatever to someone to build a dam, they often use these terms, but it's basically doing the same thing, looking at the pros and cons. I just started asking you, what would you want to know? Here's perhaps a fuller list. The BC Environmental Assessment Law has 5 pillars. It's what they call, often people call it environmental impacts, but I prefer the term biophysical actually, because then it's getting at specifically, or it's avoiding the ambiguity of the term environment, because we could talk about cultural environments and economic environments and social environments, etc. Anyway, community impacts, that's things, you know, one of the issues we're looking at right now for the Metlakatla Nation and the Gitgat Nation regarding LNG development is this influx of labor, influx of people. And if you get a big influx of workers to a community, what kinds of things might happen in that community? Any ideas? How about yourself in the hat there? If you get a whole bunch of young guys coming to a community, a small town, what do you think those young guys might do? How about if like, imagine you live in a town of 5,000 people and 2,000 guys between the age of 20 and 40 start working there for a year. And they're hanging out in your community for a year. Come on, what do guys like to do when they're young? Party. Exactly. So what does partying lead to? If you imagine if you had, this is a real life situation right now in Terrace. Terrace is a community where and Kitimat, there's a big Rio Tinto Alcan, it's an aluminum plant. They're undergoing what they call the modernization project right now, and there's literally a couple thousand, mostly guys there, young guys. What do you think is going on the weekends there? Come on, someone elaborate on this story. Just guess. Yeah. Totally. There's violence. There drugs come in. Prostitution. You get. It changes dynamics in the community. You get. Some cases, some places, a lot more racism. You know, a lot of Aboriginal people get subjected to more abuse. Was there some other ideas down here? Yeah, you started to say something. What? Maybe for some people it might be. All right, so I want to focus on economic impacts. I'm probably already talking way longer than I expected to. How would you assess the economic impacts of something like Northern Gateway? I think, do you guys get into methods?
Not so much.
All right, well, how would, where's the starting point anyway? Any ideas? Someone's got to have an idea. Okay, the value of the project. What do you mean by the value?
What's the capacity of the pipeline, say, and the price of oil, and what you expect to bring in gross, say, over some period. Go ahead.
So you're looking at how much product, how much oil is going through the pipeline, how big is the pipeline, how much can go per unit of time, what's the price, so you multiply that volume times price, you get gross revenue. Yeah. What else? Jobs. Yeah, that's a good point. Why would there be short-term and long-term? What are you thinking there?
Short-term is actually building the pipeline, but then long-term is taking the pipeline and operating it.
Yep. Yeah, so there's construction phase jobs and operational phase. And yeah, all these pipelines we're talking, 1,000 people a year or whatever for 4 years to build some of these terminals, LNG terminals. I think one of them they're even talking about 5,000 in Prince Rupert people for about a 4-year period, and then dropping to like 200 people for 20 years, 30 years, whatever. Yeah.
They're projecting like revenue somewhere in the billions for these LNG pipes, for these LNG plants. Do you believe those figures, or do you think they're just?
We can come back to that. That's actually something I am going to come back to. So we got jobs. There's gross revenue. What other types of economic impacts might there be? I don't know, what kind of revenue, what were you referring to? Are you talking private revenue?
I think tax revenue.
Taxes. Any other ideas for economic impacts? Yeah. Yeah, well, how would the pipeline affect them? What are you getting at there? So, okay, what kind of local economic effects then are you referring to? So environmental impacts, you're also talking about local spending, I wrote local consumption there. Spending is probably a better word. Environmental impacts. And this is an economics class. I want to hone in on economic impacts. Can you think about these environmental impacts through an economic lens? A couple nodding. Yeah, you're nodding there with the glasses. No, I thought you were nodding. Were you just like falling off to sleep? You're not. You're shaking your, or moving your head too. What kind of risk?
The risk of an accident.
Okay, accidents. So how would that translate? How would you think about that economically?
Well, exactly. The cost to clean it up, or repairs that.
Cost to clean up. Yeah, there was a really neat, I didn't look in detail at it, but it looked pretty sound. UVic did I think it was the Law Society or Law Center or whatever, did a study for Edmonton Northern Gateway looking at costs to clean up and who might bear those costs, and what funds are available in Canada and around the world to deal with a spill if Northern Gateway ship spilled. All right, any other ideas? Any other types of costs or benefits? Are jobs costs or benefits? And what are you thinking? So, could there be job costs as well as job benefits? Anyone want to respond to Dave's comment there? Yeah. I know you can't really read that, but I'm writing down wages. So you said, yeah, there might be some new jobs on the pipeline, if we're thinking about the pipeline specifically. Might any jobs be lost? Okay, we got the usual suspects here. We need some other people. All right, you back there in the white hat. If there was an oil spill in the ocean, what kind of jobs might be lost? Fishing jobs. So jobs lost as well as gained. Any other ideas and jobs that might be lost? How about KTML back there? HTML? What other kinds of, do you have any, what other kinds of, yeah, yourself in the, do you have any, can you guess what other industries exist up along the BC coast there? There's commercial fishing, there's already shipping, What do you think people from around the world go up there to see something? Any guesses? I'm sorry? Mark? I'm missing what you're saying. The market. Okay, I'm missing, I'm still missing what you're saying. Elaborate. What, a market for what? Or am I missing? Is someone else? The oil market, or? Okay, can anyone else take a guess? Which? Tourism, exactly. There's a white creature up there that people pay a lot of money to go see. I'm going to show you. Uh-oh, what happened? Oops, I turned it off. I didn't mean to do that. The white creature. You know, I meant to hit escape and I hit power. It's just turning off or something. You know what? Forget that. Anyone ever heard of the spirit bear? Spirit bear. You haven't heard of that? Have you heard of the Great Bear Rainforest? Who's heard of the spirit bear? 1 hand, 2 hands, 3 hands. Okay, I got to show you this photo then. I spent, in the fall, I spent about 2 hours between me and the camera with a river in between, a bear about this big, pulling a salmon out of the river every 10 minutes. This big mother bear just chowing down, chowing down. People pay thousands and thousands of dollars to see that. And actually my hosts were really upset with me because I wasn't as blown away as they thought I should be. I actually was. It was just kind of like, it felt too easy because okay, escape. How do I do this here? North Coast work trip. Okay, I'm already getting way off script. Okay, well, I'm just going to keep it rolling. What you see here is we are near Hartley Bay. So we're in Wright Sound where all these ships would go through. I'm staying with the Git Gal, and the guy on the left, if you see any movies about spirit bears, you're going to see him. He's the guy. This woman, I can't remember her name. She's a freelance writer from Ireland. She and her friend from Ireland were there. It was the end of the season. Tons of fish going up this river. So we get dropped off on a boat. What's that? This is end of September. So the boat's leaving us. That's looking out where these tankers would go through. We started hiking up the river. We're starting to see bits of fish all over the place, like this. I'm told that some of it's from wolves. The wolves eat the brains. The fish are just going crazy. Last year was a big run up there. And so the wildlife were near the rivers. Here's some black bears, 2 cubs in a tree and a mother over there. We're heading through the stream. There's actually fish there. Can't really see them from my little camera. All those little black things are fish. So we basically spent 2 hours here. This is a black bear, but it's an albino. It's the only place in the world where there's a gene where some of them are white. And what I've heard the hypothesis is, or the theory is, that when the fish are looking up, these things have a bit of a hunting advantage because they sort of blend in with the sky. If I had more time, I'd show you a video or something, but I don't. All right, back to this. All right, I want to get in and cover off. There's sort of 2 main methods that are used in project evaluation or EA around the world to assess economic impacts. 2 sets of methods. One is called, there's a labeling problem. Maybe, Dave, you can help me out this later. Economic impact analysis. I use the acronym ECON-IA to differentiate from EIA, because EIA often means environmental impact assessment. And cost-benefit analysis. Any of these terms mean anything to you guys? Are they familiar at all? Both of them, or just one? Or? Okay. Economic impact analysis. Very commonly used in Canada and elsewhere in the world. Starts by asking about CapEx, that's capital costs. So if Enbridge Northern Gateway, they originally said $5.5 billion to build it. OpEx is operational costs, so that's things like purchasing electricity over the lifespan of the project, paying labor to run it. Labor needs, how many people do we need in the construction phase, operations phase? What are the tax payments going to be? And also we'd include royalty payments. In the case of pipeline, there aren't any royalties. So you might have heard the terms input-output analysis. That's a common technique. People use multipliers. I don't know if you've heard about direct, indirect, and induced impacts. Does that mean anything to anybody? Okay, so let's say I work on the pipeline. Let's say I get paid to dig the trench, and I make, let's say, $80,000 a year. I'm an expensive ditch digger. And then I live, let's say I move to Kitimat for this. And if I live in that community, what am I doing with my $80,000 a year? Someone was talking about local spending. You were. Was it you? I'm renting movies, well, maybe not anymore with Netflix. I'm buying groceries. I'm buying gasoline for my truck. That's induced impact. So the direct job impact would be me getting that $80,000 as a laborer. An induced impact would be me spending that locally. Indirect impact would be not about the laborer, but it would be jobs related to supplying the pipeline with things like steel. It would be equipment. So if you're a laborer working in wherever it is in Illinois that makes big equipment, what's that company? What's that? Caterpillar. If you work for Caterpillar in Illinois, they make these massive bulldozers and everything. That'd be an indirect impact of building a pipeline, because they have to buy Caterpillar trucks and bulldozers, and so jobs are created indirectly. This is actually what, for the Kearl oil sands mine, these were the results of the economic impact analysis. $5.5 billion GDP impact for construction and $1 billion per year for each operational year. 21,000 person years of employment. If I work for 1 year, that's a person year. But if I work for 5 years, that's 5 person years, but 1 job for 5 years. So anyway, that lingo can be confusing. 2,700 person years annually for operations. 24 billion in royalties and tax revenue. Sounds pretty big, doesn't it? Like Enbridge Northern Gateway, the Kearl oil sands mine, you look at those numbers, and I don't know, a lot of people probably get excited. So this other method, cost-benefit analysis, it has a very different way of looking at costs and benefits. Does that formula make any sense to anybody? Does anyone ever see it? What does NPV stand for? Net present value. And then what it says there, it's the sum of all benefits minus cost, so benefits times t, cost minus cost times t. It's just saying it's discounted. That 1 plus r, the time t, is discounted. Is discounting, have you guys talked about that? All right. Various techniques to deal with things like environmental impact and then discounting. It sounds like you're familiar with. So one study said that the Kearl oil sands mine, instead of this, it said it's going to have an NPV of minus 11 billion under base case scenario, as well as a variety of negative but unmonetized impacts on air and water quality. This is my PhD. And it's, I don't think I'll have time, but I get into how we came up with that number. So Why is there such a big difference in those numbers? Did I already give the answer away? Yeah, I sort of did. Maybe you saw it. Maybe I'll just go to there. Opportunity costs. Does the term opportunity cost mean anything to anybody? Yeah, okay. What's an opportunity cost? Right. So let's say I am a welder, and I get employed on Northern Gateway. So I go work on Northern Gateway, and I get paid $80,000 a year. Economic impact analysis will say $80,000, or could translate just job numbers. However many jobs. Let's say I'm working on it for 4 years to build this thing, 4-person years. What's the opportunity cost, though? If I'm paid $80,000, that's $80,000 going into my bank account. Is there an opportunity cost there? No? Why do you say that? I'm sorry? Let's say, though, that I was working for $60,000 here a year in Ontario, making welding here. I'm sorry? Yeah, so there's only a $20,000 wage premium here. I make $20,000 more a year. So that's the problem, is that economic impact analysis, the method which is commonly used in these environmental assessments, it ignores those opportunity costs. And it just says, hey, there's an $80,000 benefit. And what cost-benefit analysis tries to do is say, hold on here, the difference, we've got to think about those opportunity costs. And it's only that 20 grand. So that's a big problem. I'm not sure if I think I skipped over how cost-benefit analysis is really uncommon in Canada, almost not even used. We used it for our Enbridge Northern Gateway work. Some SFU consultants, SFU-based consultants, did that as well. And we basically pressured the proponent, Enbridge, to get their economic consultants to do their own cost-benefit. But generally, cost-benefit techniques are not used. So assumes no opportunity costs of project inputs. And that's because economic impact analysis is it's designed for looking at local or regional impacts. Sort of the assumption is, from a Kitimat perspective, if we come in and invest $5.5 billion on a pipeline, Kitimat wouldn't have otherwise, you can probably make the case that it wouldn't have otherwise seen that influx of money. So from a local perspective, there might not be any opportunity costs. But from a national perspective or a global perspective, that $5.5 billion is coming from somewhere. So these are the types of questions that we get into is thinking about those opportunity costs. And you get this strange consequence from this method, economic impact analysis. It's commonly used, and because of the way it ignores opportunity costs, the more expensive a project, according to that method, the more beneficial it is. If it costs $10 billion, hurrah. Whereas, if I asked you to spend the next year digging a hole and filling it back in again, and I paid you $50,000 to do that, does society get anywhere? So the method you use has a strong impact on the answer you're getting, the assumptions that go in it. And I guess what I'm getting at here is that methods that are often used give a very skewed picture of what the real values are, the net benefits.
Does the government or industry have one preferred method for these choices?
Yeah, and I don't know, where are we at now? 9:04, I got 25 minutes. I'm going to get into that. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. So, Dave asked the question, does industry or government or anyone else, do they have a preferred method? Maybe before we answer that question, let's just cover these other points here. Economic impact analysis tends to ignore a variety of project costs. It ignores environmental impacts, even though you could translate some of those very easily into a financial, into a monetary number. Tends to ignore, let's say I'm Kitimat, I'm the mayor of Kitimat, and I might get $1 million a year from this Enbridge terminal. So they're paying me because they're on Kitimat land, let's say. It's in municipal land, so they're paying property tax. Does the city of Kitimat have to do anything? Or might there be any sort of costs or burdens on my shoulders, the city of Kitimat, by having this activity within my municipal boundaries? Come on, imagine yourself. What do cities pay for? What do cities provide? Waste management. What else? Sorry? Yeah, healthcare would be the province, but nonetheless, governments provide that. So that, yep, I mean, it's valid. It's not, Kitimat wouldn't take care of that, but it's valid to what I'm getting at. What else do cities provide? What does the city of Burnaby provide to people? You pay, if you're a homeowner here, you pay taxes. What do you get out of that? Water, roads. What's that? Parking meters, yeah. All right, so this is a problem, is that economic impact analysis, it says, okay, what are the property taxes? And it sort of stops there. It doesn't ask, what are the incremental burdens on the municipality? And so with Emerging Northern Gateway, you might get a whole bunch of trucks going up and down, ruining roads. You might get a whole bunch more people in there, and the province has to pay for more healthcare facilities, let's say. Another problem, no or little consideration of uncertainty. I talked about my numbers for the Curl Oil Sands mine of 11 billion or negative 11 billion. I did 20 different scenarios. I altered different parameters in the model because things are uncertain, like the price of oil, hugely uncertain, goes up and down. And so you got to account for that. But the way these studies are typically done, they just ignore that stuff. In general, they're super shoddy. Right, and so it all comes down to this. I think a good synonym for economic impact analysis techniques is you could just call it gross impact assessment, as in gross paycheck versus net. What you care about at the end of the day on your paycheck is what you get after taxes and deductions, not gross. Yeah? The which? Yeah, I suppose. And to be honest, I don't know a ton about interest rates, but the discount rate. Yeah, absolutely. None of this stuff's discounted. Nothing's discounted in economic impact analysis. Yeah, it is so crappy, and it gets back to your question, your comment a minute ago. I'm going to skip over this pretty quick, but have a look at the top. That's gross jobs. What we really want is an answer like this: net jobs created. So we want to cut out things like displacement, leakage, dead weight, substitution, etc. So you get this big circle coming in from economic impact analysis studies, and in a way, we're trying to. What I try and do in my work is provide an accurate picture of this and think about those offsetting effects. There are problems with CBA too, difficulty valuing and monetizing types of impacts. I'm going to quickly go through this and not get into the details. Cognitive challenges and bias. So this is getting at if you're trying to monetize things like greenhouse gas emissions. You get all sorts of methodological problems and philosophical questions too. Controversy over things like discount rate, mistrust, etc. What I'm trying to lay out here is what a good impact assessment, whether we're talking about economic impacts or cultural impacts or biophysical or health. I want to focus on values. What I mean there is the things that matter to people. But what I've spent the last 20 minutes, half an hour talking about largely is this second bullet. Incrementality. Thinking about what impacts would happen over and above what would already occur. So that's, in a sense, that's getting at things like opportunity costs. If I was going to work here for $60,000 a year and then get a job for $80,000, you got to think, what would I be doing otherwise? And that, you can ask that question for all sorts of things. It's relevant for all sorts of things. And impact assessment has to be complete, so think about direct plus cumulative effects. Cumulative effects are things like, Emerging Northern Gateway might be employing me for $80,000 and bringing people there, but there might also be some other project that's bringing people here, and so you have the labor forces of two different projects all coming in on Kitimat. Excuse me. We want to think about all types of effects to all affected. Look at all the different parties. There's different groups that are affected differently. Facts and values. At the end of the day, what you're doing is gathering that information and trying to create something meaningful out of it. And that typically involves bringing in who. So if I was a decision maker and I'm gathering all this information, it's important for me as the Premier of BC, let's say, to make a good decision. But who else matters in the decisions of things like Enbridge Northern Gateway? Who are some of the parties? What's that? Communities, like which communities along the route. Why is that?
Well, there's going to be a construction zone for the duration of the building. They're going to have a line pumping, toxic chemicals through the community for a while, or foreseeable future.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and communities, and Aboriginal communities in particular. Some of these, I got to check the number again. Something like 60% of their calories come from traditional food still. And it's like a huge list of different things that they're gathering and hunting and fishing out there. All right, this is getting at Dave's question. Economic impact assessment. Remember I used the term economic impact analysis to try and differentiate a set of techniques that I think are flawed? This term economic impact assessment, I'm just referring to more broadly the assessment of economic impacts here, whether it's through CBA or economic impact analysis or whatever. So it's typically done poorly. I've given you a real rush job on why I think some of those problems are. Dave asked a question. What are some of the reasons why these studies might be done poorly? What are your guesses or intuitions telling you? So they might, right, okay, so those are some of the problems that might miss some information, but why? Why are these studies done poorly? Yeah. Okay, so subjectivity is just, and what's the problem there? Because I can think of two sources of these subjectivities or types. So that's like an interest bias. They have a bias grounded in, they've got a particular interest to get something done. Yeah, that can be a problem for sure. Yeah, down here. Rush, so speed, so limit of resources and time. That's a good one. I'm not even sure I've got that up there. I guess it's related. What else? What are the types of biases? You're doing these complex studies where you have to choose things like discount rates. Is there another category of bias you can think of? Or a type of bias that would shape what kind of method you use? Sorry? Different price. So different price of oil, you mean? Place. Yeah, so elaborate. What more are you? Right, so okay, if I understand you correctly, you're saying, yeah, depending upon where accidents would happen, there are different costs. Okay. How does that relate to why these studies are often done poorly, if you accept my argument? Well, here's another type of bias. I call it domain bias. Imagine you are an engineer, and you go through university in engineering. I don't know, maybe some of you are engineers, and you are being taught certain techniques, and then you find yourself in the workplace. And imagine another one of you is an economist, and you learn certain techniques. Anyway, both of you end up in a decision-making situation on methods. Might you have different ideas on what methods to use? The answer is yes. So it's not an interest bias, it's just a bias based upon your background, your worldview, your education, etc. Here's my list. Some people think that certain techniques are useful and others aren't, and that might come down to the types of outputs, the types of answers that different methods put out. And so a lot of people argue that cost-benefit analysis isn't really that useful. Economists will say, well, we need to know economic efficiency, and that's what cost-benefit analysis is really getting at. But what politicians care about is how many jobs are there going to be, what's the tax revenue going to be, et cetera. And economic impact analysis naturally spits out answers in those terms. I would argue that cost-benefit analysis could spit out those answers in those terms. It just often isn't. Domain bias, talked about that. Ignorance of the strengths and weaknesses of different methods. Considered too difficult or expensive, and I guess that gets at your convo about how much time you got. Lack of guidance out there on how to do good impact assessment. Lack of trust in methods like CBA, and that's definitely a case. You know, part of my PhD was looking at the oil sands and what methods are used and how environmental assessment's done there. And I directly asked people about a couple methods, including cost-benefit analysis, and people just said, no, we've gone down that road many times. There's all sorts of problems, and you know, it's a black box. We don't know what comes out at the end, etc. I'd argue that exists with these other methods. But strategic reasons, 5 minutes. So I think that's what Dave was getting at. Especially right now. If you're Christy Clark, does anyone not know who Christy Clark is? Put up your hand if you don't know who Christy Clark is. No one wants to. No. Okay, you guys are in BC. That's the premier. And what's Christy Clark saying re LNG, liquefied natural gas? She won this last election, in large part based upon a promise to cleanest fossil fuels in terms of carbon, yeah?
And the previous premier created an emissions cap, but with this new LNG, it goes over the cap. So we just decided that LNG is now clean energy, so that it counted that.
True. So there's climate change law in BC that her predecessor brought in, and natural gas has some carbon emissions if we start to liquefy because it uses a huge amount of energy. She's pointing out. And so Christy Clark is rejigging the rules to make LNG clean. But the bigger issue is she's saying we're going to solve BC's budget woes by exporting a ton of this gas. We're going to make a ton of money. So does she want, if she was dictating those rules, would she want methods that question, and I'm not saying CBA, cost-benefit analysis, would find a negative answer with LNG. But let me tell you that economic impact analysis, the methods that are currently used, everything is through rosy glasses. Things look amazing. In cost-benefit analysis, things don't look so good. They might still look positive, but they certainly don't look so good. So there's a strategic reason. Like, I'm not surprised that we don't have government trying to improve these types of studies. It's a battle I'm constantly picking with regulators. When I can. You know, I had some other slides about my oil sands cost-benefit analysis, but maybe I'll skip it and just open it up.
But also emphasize more on the significance of these choices and how that leads to different projects and the problems of that. I mean, you already said it, but if you want to
Yeah.
cover that.
I mean, have a look here. I don't know if you can read that. But this, again, was what the Imperial Oil, they're the proponent for the Curl Oil Sands mine. It's a big oil sands project in Alberta. This is their initial study. This was its economic impact study. Big numbers, billions of GDP impact, 21,000 person years of employment during construction, et cetera, 24 billion in royalties and tax revenue. And maybe my study's wrong, but what a different number, hey? Minus 11 billion. You know what? I'll show you where that number comes from. There you go. So you talked originally about the pipeline and volume. I mean, that's that revenue number at the top, 59 billion. That's really just looking at how much oil is going to come out of there over the 30, 40-year lifespan. This is a base case price. Big number. But then project costs. So that's capital costs and operational costs. Anyway, you see that number minus 35 billion there, minus 34,966 million. That's environmental costs. That's largely greenhouse gas damages to the world. And actually, there you go. This shows it differently. this shows who the different stakeholders are in the Coral Oil Sands mine. The proponents, that's basically Imperial Oil and its investors. According to my study, way up there, $8 billion benefit. Government of Alberta through royalties and some taxes, $12 billion benefit. Federal government, almost $4 billion benefit. And then most of the environmental impacts wasn't able to monetize. But look at this. Canada gets a small GHG damages of $151 million over the life of the project. Most of it goes to the rest of the planet.
So Canada's going to make $25 billion, the plant's going to lose $34 billion, and Canada gets to vote on the project.
Canada, from Canada's perspective, it's a gain.
That's $25 billion. More or less.
I suppose, yeah.
So why would Canada not do that project?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I mean, this is what a good study I would say should do. Is it should try and differentiate and who's the benefit, who's the loser.
But if this just to finish your talk, the other last minute or whatever, this is going to send a bunch of hydrocarbons to the coast. I don't know if this project is going to, but they're put a bunch of hydrocarbons.
Yeah, this would feed into it.
And say that was going to go to China or that was going to go to Asia, and they were going to use all those hydrocarbons. They're not necessarily paying that cost either. They see this as cheaper fuel that reduces their costs, and now they have benefits. So now say that China sees the benefits of the project, Canada sees the benefits of the project. They both agree it's a good idea.
They might. It depends how you.
Who doesn't like this project? Where are these rest of the world people?
Well, China would be suffering some of these too. And you know what's controversial about this number is it includes emissions from consumption. So we spent a lot of time agonizing about whether to include the GHGs coming out of the tailpipe of cars. Yeah, this is it's tricky, and you're getting into some of these methodological gray zones of cost benefit when we're trying to think about the globe and those opportunity costs. And I don't have the brain power right now to get into it.
You set it up. You did it perfectly.
You know, let's go for beers and then we can debate that or talk about that one further. Any, right, you guys have to wrap up now or something?
Yeah.
Well, I hope that wasn't too much of a whirlwind through, but hopefully it turned on a light bulb or two.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.